Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way Yorkville. Happy Monday evening, guys. Welcome to tonight's question and answer. I know last week we had a topic. This week we're having a question and answer. Next week we're going to have an awesome kind of intro to the upcoming 5 minutes of fire, which is going to be 5 minutes, 5 minute workouts done every day leading up to Christmas Eve. Is going to be really fun. Prizes as well. And also, we have some pretty awesome t-shirts that you can do in order to support our cause, guys. So question and answer tonight. Right now, we are streaming live onto YouTube and also onto a couple of Facebook platforms. Also, shout out to Instagram, which we're streaming on our phone, sitting right over here, just because we don't have any way to do a platform included on our platform. So I know that we have a lot of people with questions that are already coming in, but if you are watching on Facebook or you're watching also on YouTube, hey, make sure that you say hello and let me know where you're watching from. We have people watching from all over the world, which is awesome, guys. Thank you so much for the support. It is really awesome to see people are interested in hearing what I have to say from a different perspective. It's honoring. I'm honored. I'm also truly humbled as well. So hopefully I add value to your life, to your health, and to your day. But before we go into question and answer, we wait for people to be able to jump on. Just a couple of things, guys. Our last inflammation event, if you're from the Chicagoland area, last inflammation event in person is going to be Tuesday, December 5th. So it's going to be a week from, I believe, 2 weeks from this Tuesday at 6:00 p.m., guys. And I will always say it time and time again, guys, you can't heal unless you first know how to make your body not inflamed. People argue back and forth. They talk about inflammation, and a lot of people talk about inflammation. They truly don't understand what it is or where it comes from. And guys, there's really no such thing as anti-inflammatory foods on how people normally describe it or how people describe it. Or also they talk about, things like ginger and turmeric and things like that. And it's like, you're missing the point. You have to understand what inflammation is, why the immune system reacts to certain things. And guys, I promise you this, if you can understand inflammation from a different perspective, that is the first step that you have to take as far as, people undergoing things like weight loss resistance or fatigue, issues with hormone issues, thyroid issues, arthritis, and things like that. Once you guys understand that, you'll know what the first step that you have to do in order to start reclaiming your health and to stop being manipulated, but instead be restored instead. And also, guys, if you are out in the contiguous 48 states, and obviously we can't see you in person, well, you go and watch the inflammation webinar. Just go to the top and you can register for the inflammation event in person, or you can register for the webinar if you're not in the Chicagoland area. And you'll see a link to a webinar. You can register for it, watch it right now, or you can watch it on Tuesday evening or Saturday morning, our time. And after that, you'll see a link that you can follow in order to do a discovery call with me personally. The cool thing is I did a couple actually today. I probably do 5 or 6 every single week, just because my time is limited, seeing people outside of our office environment. But we have seen just in the last, couple of weeks, people from Texas, from Massachusetts, from Washington State, all over the country, which is really, really cool. And a lot of times people will say this, they say, I've been following you for years. And finally, I just got up the nerve to watch the webinar and to make that call. And afterwards, they say, boy, am I glad I did. Even did a consult today from someone who is in Australia. And I know what you're saying. Yeah, I thought you said you don't see people, outside of the contiguous 48 states. Well, this guy was very special, near and dear to my heart, only because we share a common interest and a common bond. So I did make an exception in regards to that. So get registered, guys, for that webinar. It will be hugely eye-opening, and I know that it will be worth your time as well. So get registered for that. And guys, one last announcement before we do the live kickoff coming up next Monday, 5 minutes of fire that's coming up. So 23 different workouts done every single day, 5 minutes of workouts. And so we have literally a bunch of different workouts that you can do with no equipment necessary, maybe a jump rope if you're a little bit advanced. But guys, sometimes a place to start is just 5 minutes. It literally is 5 minutes. You'd be amazed at the physiological hormonal change that can take place with just 5 minutes of doing some movements, particularly done at a high intensity as well. And not every day will be a high intensity workout. Some of them will be 5 minutes of just some very intense ab exercises. So not every day are we going to be giving you some kind of metabolic blast or anything like that. But guys, it's a great way to start from somewhere and start to improve your movement, range of motion, and also get metabolically a little bit more fit, and also develop, muscles that you need for everyday life. So we'll make the official announcement on Monday. We'll give you all the details and how you can get involved, what you can download, links to the videos as far as some demonstrations, and then also how you can support our cause by getting an awesome t-shirt. Mandate burpees, 1 star for burpees, would not recommend. And then my favorite, nobody cares, just work harder. All right. So we'll have you have an opportunity to support our cause by getting a t-shirt. And if you do, and you send me an email with you wearing that shirt, you'll be entered into the drawing at the end for some awesome prizes, guys. So with that being said, I'm excited for 5 Minutes of Fire. I've done all of this stuff. It's all ready and just waiting to go. Now we're just waiting for December 1st. So live question and answer tonight. I always like to take some time with you wonderful people and be able to answer your questions as best as I can in the context, of not knowing you or seeing any labs or anything like that. So guys, let's go and fire away when it comes to questions. I think I'll go to Instagram first. I do take a question on Facebook or on YouTube, I can actually bring it up onto the live broadcast. So hopefully I haven't skipped over some people. And if I do, I apologize, because I know some of the things just scroll pretty quickly. So first question is 3-year-old with dermatitis and eczema, what can you do in order to help? So the first thing that I would say is this. In fact, I saw a new patient today who's had psoriasis. So, and here's the interesting thing is that he's had skin problems his whole time, like almost his whole life. It started off with acne. He went on Accutane, and after he went on Accutane, which is synthetic vitamin A, can cause liver damage, he started to develop psoriasis after that. The interesting thing is anytime that you're talking about skin, I want you to think of this. The skin is a barrier. The skin is a barrier. The gastrointestinal system is a barrier. The lungs are a barrier. The genitourinary tract is a barrier. And I'll keep saying this is where most of your immune system sits at the barrier. Where would you want to fight the battle? If you were a general, where would you put your soldiers? I asked this guy this question. I said, if you were a general, where would you put your soldiers, knowing nothing about war? He said, I'd put them at the front lines to guard and protect the castle. And I said, that's right. Most of your immune system is sitting that way, which means if the skin is getting inflamed, start looking deeper. And so what I want you to do is think of gastrointestinal system, because an inflammatory process at the gastrointestinal system, there's lots of immune cells that are sitting there, and they're sitting there in order to protect from a foreign invader. So the 3-year-old is getting issues with the skin, with eczema, dermatitis, inflammation. The first thing for a 3-year-old that I would look at is what's going on in the gastrointestinal system. And for a 3-year-old, the questions that I would ask is, were they breastfed? When were they introduced food? It might have been introduced food too early. Were they introduced formula? Were they introduced solid foods prior to 1 year of age? And then also there's some other things too, is anything that can assault the barriers, which are going to be the, whats and things like that, if you know what I'm talking about. But if you can look at that, and you can look at the stool, you can look at the presence of, if they've been fed food too early, they can develop a lot of food allergies, things like that. And then what you want to do is you want to calm down the immune system. You want to do it by testing. You want to do a food allergy test. You want to do a stool test, even in a 3-year-old, and then see if there is infection and see how inflamed the gastrointestinal barrier is, and do the things necessary to rebuild that barrier, be able to calm down that immune system. And so we have seen people with eczema, and we've seen people with acne and things like that. And by handling in that fashion, we've seen those things start to calm back down. Remember, it's an immune system reaction, but look and see those different things, because those are some of the mechanisms that can actually have started it. So great question, guys. If you're watching right now, make sure you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from as well. We'll take one more question from Instagram, and then what we'll do is we'll go over to Facebook. Okay. In Asia, there's a lot of hype about salmon DNA for health. Is it true that salmon DNA can cure disease? I would actually say this. No. So, and I want you to think of this. You guys ever wonder, everybody was all up in arms about, oh my gosh, we shouldn't actually inject any DNA straight into the body. But if you are eating, and I'm guessing that's what we're doing, is that you're eating salmon DNA. But the thing is this is why they can't administer medications like insulin, for example, why it has to be injected, because guess what breaks down the proteins? DNA. is going to be a protein. What breaks it down? The stomach acid. That's the purpose of stomach acid. So if you actually fed someone oral insulin, the stomach would actually break it down. So, and just remember this. Anytime that someone says, here is the new latest and greatest for weight loss, here's the newest, latest and greatest for rejuvenation, for anti-aging and things like that, I've never seen one that's actually worked other than just the hype behind it. And I want you to think of over the last, I don't know, 20 years, is that the ketogenic diet was going to revolutionize things. And then people got kind of tired of that. And then they said, yeah, it's going to be the Mediterranean diet. Then it's going to be the South Beach diet. Prior to that, even before ketogenic, was the Atkins diet. Now people are touting the carnivore diet, and some people are getting better. But I'm like, if you understood why people, are getting better. And then there's always like new supplements and things like that, so 10, 15 years ago, vitamin D, then it was CBD oil, then it was noni juice, and then it was pomegranate, and then it was, like you name it. Now that, the latest and greatest right now is berberines, for weight loss and things like that. And it's not to discount that there isn't a benefit of doing it, but I would actually say this is that the benefits are always going to be overstated. Do I actually recommend berberines for people? Absolutely. But if they refuse to change their life, I won't give them anything. I will not help them. I will not help them because it's a losing battle, because the most powerful thing that you can change is your habits. That's the most powerful thing. And so anybody that's touting that this is going to cure disease or anything like that, there's nothing that will cure disease. In fact, you cure yourself. And the body is miraculous. And so if we're waiting for some kind of special supplement, even if it's natural or anything like that, you're missing the point that the most miraculous thing is your body, and it doesn't need help. What it needs first and foremost is for you not to interfere with it. That's the biggest thing. Stop interfering with it, because the body is already miraculous in and of itself. Okay. So let's go to Facebook and let's see if we can take a couple of questions. Someone has a question in regards to the glucose ketone index. Is it a reliable metric to track your mitochondrial health status? It's a mathematical ratio of blood glucose to ketones as a signal value. So is it a tool for good mitochondrial health? That I don't really know. And in fact, do I think that the ketogenic diet is good? Perhaps. I think that there is a lot of value with it, but I also think that the ketogenic diet is probably something that you should do short term, and it shouldn't be something that you should do all of the time. Okay. Um, uh, the same thing, because you are going to be missing some things. And and I'm actually someone who promoted the ketogenic diet when it was a fad. But as you learn more and you learn about more with physiology and things like that, you're going to say you're going to be missing out if you are having 65, 70% fat and 5% carbs and 25% proteins and things like that. One of the best things in order to help with mitochondrial health is actually high intensity exercise. So doing that helps to increase mitochondria, specifically within the muscle cells as well. Remember, your muscles are a big driver when it comes to your metabolism as well. So have I put people on a keto-like diet? Absolutely. Have I taken people off of a ketogenic diet? Yes. Have I put people on a carnivore type diet? Yes. Have I put people on a vegan type diet? The answer is also yes. And it just comes down to testing as well. So that's why testing, guys, is going to be so important, and making sure that you're doing and you're testing some things, because you might not need to be on ketogenic diet for a long period of time. So I want to give a shout out to on Facebook to Christine Brown from Burnaby, British Columbia, which I believe is a suburb of Vancouver. She always leaves just awesome, wonderful comments, and her life has been changed and transformed just by watching the lives and going on to the Wellness Way, No Sugar Challenge, and things like that. She always says wonderful things. I always like it, but I don't know if I've given an actual shout out to you. So Christine, thanks so much for your kind words. We appreciate everything that you do, and follow along on the page. And I hope things are going well in Canada as well. So hi, watching from Australia. That is awesome. It's probably 7 o'clock in the morning there, maybe. That's pretty early. All right. One more question from Facebook. This goes from Doug Cathy. Any advice for my friend? They've lost tremendous on muscle mass secondary to deadly COVID vaccines, subsequently multi-year diarrhea linked to nutritional deficiencies, inability to absorb nutrients with an underlying colitis. Well, you've said it actually right there, is why would someone lose a tremendous amount of muscle mass? because it's not necessarily what you eat, it's what your body's able to absorb and assimilate. And so if there is a lot of problems in the gastrointestinal system, and I want you to think of the gastrointestinal system, the first thing that needs to happen is in the stomach, and you have to break down proteins and you have to sterilize your food. That's the first thing. Being sick or being in a constant fight or flight response will absolutely decimate stomach acid production. So you're not going to even break down proteins, but you're also not going to be able to get some mineral absorption, B12 absorption, iron absorption, potassium absorption, and zinc absorption, things like that, because you need the actual stomach acid in order to be able to absorb it. And if they have a lot of diarrhea and things like that, there is probably, some kind of leaky gut type symptoms in which there's a lot of proteins leaking through the barrier, in which the immune system is then producing what would be known as a histamine response. Guys, here's the thing. Have you ever eaten a food and within 15 to 20 minutes, you're like, oh my gosh, my stomach is upset, and you have to run to the bathroom? And so one of those things is that you can even start an immune system response even in the stomach. Okay. And so in the presence of some kind of foods, you can have a histamine response. It becomes systemic. And as it circulates through, it will stimulate the bowels to start getting rid of some things, as well. So people are having a lot of diarrhea. Look at the histamine response and a diarrhea response, from that. And so that's why probably getting a food allergy test, getting a stool test, try to figure out that. And that way you can see stomach function, pancreatic function, liver function with gallbladder release. You can look at the microbiome to see what's growing, what's decreased, what's increased, because there may be now, because of what's happening, specific overgrowth, undergrowth. There may be yeast. There may be infection that's taking place. And so the only way to know is just to really, really test. And a lot of times we'll start people on first is just, getting some high stomach acid in just to help them break down their foods. And that can actually help them as well. So, Michelle, can you talk a little bit about the herb Bacopa? Okay. Michelle, you must have a Wellness Way doctor be talking about Bacopa. Bacopa is an herb, and it's known for its effect on calming down the brain. And so we use it as a brain therapeutic, for specific people, specifically with ADD and ADHD, and also with, certain kinds of things with dementia. There has been some research that has shown that it has some brain regenerative properties to it. And so mainly what we use it for is for kids and adults who have a really hard time calming down the brain. So it actually will help with some inhibitory neurotransmitters that help to calm down the brain so that they can start to slow down, think more clearly, and also enjoy better sleep. And there's certain other things that can help with brain inhibitory neurotransmitters, things like passion flower, California poppy, L-theanine, chamomile, things like that. And so a lot of times we're trying to pick out the ones that have the highest crossover effect to help them in other areas as well. So that way they're not on 19 different things as well. So let's go back to Instagram. My daughter has nausea every single day. And let me bring this one down. My daughter has nausea every day, never vomits, usually before or after eating. And we've ruled out parasites and allergies. And what do you think we should look into, or what could be causing this? Okay. First thing is how old is your daughter? The number two thing that I would say is when you say that you tested for allergies, what kind of allergies have you tested for? So there's IgG and there's IgE food allergies. So there's two different types of responses that can take place. IgE will happen very quickly, and IgG can happen more slowly. That's why I call it a delayed response hypersensitivity. But she's getting nausea every single day. She probably does have food allergies, because a high histamine response actually can produce an effect of nausea. Okay. Also, too, depending on how old she is, she may be having some issues with gallbladder. I remember we had a young, I call him a boy, but he was about 18 or 19 years of age, who was literally spent about 2 years of throwing up 3 to 4 times per day, 3 to 4 times per day. So as a result of throwing up every single day and having tremendous nausea, couldn't keep anything down. He had lost a tremendous amount of weight. But he also developed a lot of erosions in his esophagus, because the acid from the stomach was coming up and it was eroding away the esophagus. And he went so far to go to the Mayo Clinic. Okay. So where I'm from in this area, if someone around here can't figure it out, we're going to the Mayo Clinic. In the Mayo Clinic, just remember they just diagnose things more, but the treatment is always going to be the same. It's always going to be the same. It's always going to be drugs. And so they diagnosed him as having acid reflux, and they put him on like a proton pump inhibitor in order to help his gastric erosions to heal. And I said, "That's what they wanted you to do, huh?" It's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Are you still throwing up?" "Yeah." And I was like, "The gastric erosions are an effect; they're not the cause." And so once we got to the reason why he was throwing up, it took a long time in order for him to be able to heal. But he went from throwing up 3 to 4 times a day to once a day to once every 2 to 3 days to once a week to then not throwing up and just having occasional nausea. And now he's doing great. But it took probably a good 18 months. And a lot of his problems were in his gallbladder and also in the liver. That's what's actually making bile acids. And so a lot of times it can mean that there could be a problem with the liver. And depending on how old she is too, does she have any menstrual cycle issues too? Because the liver is responsible for metabolizing those hormones every single month. All right, one more question. One more question coming from Instagram. This comes from Dixik Yogini. Sorry if I mispronounced that. What anti-inflammatory diet would you recommend for Hashimoto's thyroiditis? Okay, so there really, guys, is no such thing as an anti-inflammatory diet. Anybody that's touting that this is an anti-inflammatory diet is if you truly want something to be non-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, the only way to know for sure is to get your foods tested. Because what might be inflammatory for one person may not be inflammatory for the other. And so when someone says this is an anti-inflammatory diet, well, what they're doing is they're giving you general rules of foods that may not be good for you. Actually, something that could be very anti-inflammatory is eat a diet in order to lower your blood sugars down. And the reason why is elevated blood sugars for a long period of time will damage your soft tissues, which will then produce an immune system response. That's why people with diabetes are always so inflamed. That's why they have inflamed arteries, inflamed joints. That's why it looks like their legs are always swollen. That's why they're getting joint replacements a lot sooner. It's why they have increase in heart disease. It's why their soft tissues and it's why they have kidney issues because their kidneys are soft tissues and they get damaged as well. But if someone has Hashimoto's, the first thing I do is get a food test. Please get a food test. But one of the things that we would always say as a general rule is avoid grains, get rid of grains. Not just wheat in order to avoid the gluten, but we're talking about anything with gliadin, which is a subfraction of gluten. So that would be wheat, oats, corn, barley. Get rid of it. And please don't tell me there's nutrition in there. Anything has nutrition, but you can easily get that nutrition from something else. And I don't care how much nutrition it has in it if it's inflaming you. And one of the things about gluten is that a lot of people jumped on the gluten bandwagon and they didn't know why. But here's one of the reasons why, even despite the fad being over, with it, is because why I say I still want you to avoid it, because if you look at the protein gluten, it actually signals the junctions in the gastrointestinal barrier to open up. And so if it's signaling the gap junctions in the gastrointestinal barrier to open up, then a lot of the things that are coming with the gluten can then leak through, which then can produce an immune system response. So I'll give you an example. Someone who eats a lot of pizza, for example, will probably see a high amount of wheat, probably barley. We'll also see cheese, eggs, black and white pepper, and anything else that's coming with pizza that you are eating. And people will say, "Oh, that's just because you're getting exposed to it. The body's going to produce an antibodies." Well, I want you to think of something. The body isn't supposed to see food proteins because it's supposed to be broken down into amino acids. So your first problem is you're not breaking foods down enough, and that's a product of stomach acid function, because no one chews their food, they don't see their food, they don't smell their food, and they're not eating in a rest and digest state. That's why doing things like apple cider vinegar can be so beneficial, because it can increase the acid of the stomach in order to help you break your food down a little bit better. So as a general rule, I'm not a fan of grains or anything that contains gluten or gliadin as well. Look up the protein, the function of it, what it does to the gastrointestinal barrier, and how it opens up the gap junctions, because your gastrointestinal system is not a impermeable wall. It's not a castle wall. There's gates in it that sometimes will actually open up for specific things as well. But if you do have Hashimoto's, please get it tested. In fact, I went over, I think, all of the different tests, maybe last week, about what you should do in order to truly understand what's going on when it comes to your thyroid. But if you haven't got any testing yet or anything like that, and you're not working with the Wellness Way doctor, that would be your next step. But yeah, avoid gluten, but it could be a lot of other things as well. Thank you guys so much for the questions. Let's see if I can catch up just a little bit. And I appreciate, guys, all the awesome questions. And then make sure, guys, if you don't follow, make sure that you follow our page as well. My Instagram is, my 19-year-old daughter always has excruciating menstrual cramps and has a very heavy flow. What should we do? Thank you, Sheila. So I'm guessing Sheila. Okay, if she's having menstrual cycle issue and excruciating menstrual cycle cramps, very heavy flow, the first thing is you want to do is you want to test the hormones, and usually we would test it just in the blood. So look at her estriol, estradiol, estrone, look at progesterone, look at some inflammatory markers as well. And then the question is she typically run short? Does she typically run long? Looking at things like insulin, A1C, all those things can play a role. And then look at the stressors. So if you can look at the menstrual cycle and say, when is it happening? And how bad is the cramps? And then you can even, track and see where those hormones at, depending on where they're at in the cycle. Sometimes it can be due to stress, low progesterone. She can't hang on to the endometrial lining. So you tend to spot, or you tend to have a really bad 1 to 2 days starting off, because the progesterone levels drop so quickly. Or sometimes it can be due to having some issues with estrogen metabolism. That would be a liver issue as well. But if she's 19, she doesn't have a production issue, at the ovaries, unless there's some blood sugar issues, high insulin or PCOS, and things like that. Okay. All right. So awesome questions, guys, from Instagram. Let's see if I can catch up a little bit. Oh, and I have. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for your guidance. My pleasure, Dixit. All right. So let's see. Let's talk about this one right here. My husband's doctor is wanting to do an ablation for his AFib. Hub is 75. What are your thoughts? So here's the thing: is the first thing that I would look at. Some people do need an ablation, but one of the things that you always want to consider is, why would someone have atrial fibrillation, or basically your heart is fluttering? Okay. So the first thing is just figure out what connects the heart. Okay. What connects the heart is nerves. So that's the first thing. What is needed in order to conduct a nerve, an action potential is what it's called within a nerve. Look at what it runs on. It runs on sodium and potassium. Sodium and potassium. So the first thing that I would ask is what's going on with his kidney function? The second thing that I ask is, are they on any blood pressure medications like an ACE inhibitor, which is going to manipulate sodium and potassium? And because sodium and potassium, that's why, they tell you to go on a low salt diet. Most people don't get enough potassium. So are they on some kind of blood pressure medication? Is there some kind of sodium, potassium, but also magnesium deficiency that's going on? Heck, what's his vagal nerve function? And even look at an X-ray of the upper part of the neck. The vagus nerve runs right along, exits the skull, and then sits right across the neck. Are there any issues, especially with posture, being in a forward head position that closes down where the vagus nerve actually comes out from the skull? And so look at blood sugars and look at all of that, but I've seen it get better. The reason why they want to do an ablation is they want to shock the heart, or they want to burn the heart into a normal rhythm, which is important. But they want to do that because if the heart isn't beating enough, some of the blood will get very sluggish, which can then cause the blood to clot because it's not flowing. And then you can run into like stroke risk and things like that. So there's probably a lot of issues, regarding his lifestyle as well. What is your take on dairy and gluten? Some say they're completely unnecessary, actually inflammatory to the body, but others say grass-fed dairy is great for your health. Okay, so just remember this: not a fan of gluten just because of the mechanism of how it works. What about dairy? So when people say dairy is inflammatory, even if it's grass-fed, that's not necessarily true. So when they say it's inflammatory, ask them this: why is it inflammatory? Like, why would the immune system go after dairy, whether it's whey or whether it's casein, which are the two proteins? The only time that it can be inflammatory is if you have a food allergy to it, in which you're not breaking it. Number one, you're not breaking it down. But a lot of people do, in fact, have an allergy to dairy. And it's not dairy in and of itself. It's the fact that there's so much dairy in everything, and it's introduced at a very, very young age. Okay. So it's just like when people make a generalized statement, um, some kind of generalized statement, then a lot of times, sometimes I'm like, do they know what they're talking about as far as what would make it inflammatory or not? So, do I think that grass fed is better? Yeah, just because of the fatty acid profile is going to be better. But it don't necessarily mean that all dairy is going to be inflammatory. All right, so from Facebook, let's see if we can bring this one up. What's your recommendation treatment for a 10-year-old girl with perioral um, dermatitis? So I'm guessing they're getting some dryness around the mouth. Usually, if that's happening, you want to check your foods, but then only that, see if there's any kind of nutritional deficiency too. So anytime there's any cracked lips, if people get cracked lips, dry lips, it can even be something as simple as not getting enough fat in the diet. But also, specific B vitamin deficiencies can also play a role in cracked lips or having some issues with inflammation around the lips. I'm guessing too, she's 10 years old. She probably licks her lips quite a bit too, in order to moisten them. So that's why you really want to make sure, even for like a 10-year-old, is look at the history a little bit further and then see, is there any like B vitamin deficiencies or any fatty acid deficiencies and things like that. So, all right. All right. So, Instagram, go ahead and fire away with your questions, guys. Um, doo- doo. um, Heidi, Jazz Fisher. What's your take on functional mushrooms? And if you can you recommend some? Functional mushrooms. I'm guessing you're talking about like medicinal mushrooms and things like that. A lot of times we will recommend medicinal mushrooms. I actually think that people should be on some level of medicinal mushrooms just for the effect that they have. Um, and yes, I'm a big fan of medicinal mushrooms. And there's a lot of them that are out there, but they all work a little bit differently. There are things like shiitake mushrooms, turkey tail, lion's mane, reishi, shaga. Um, and a lot of it will be depending on what we kind of see going on the testing. Um, so I probably recommend the most for people is reishi or shaga. And a lot of times we'll recommend it if people do have a lot of viral issues that are going on, or heck, even if they have mold mycotoxicity. And when you test it, there are actually some binders that are like that. Reishi is a good binder for the removal of mold mycotoxins. So it just depends on what the testing is. A lot of people say, "Hey, do you recommend mushroom coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's good, but they're probably going to be in kind of smaller amounts." It's the same thing when people say, "Do you recommend chamomile tea?" And I'm like, if I tell you to take 2 or 3 teaspoons of it, you probably are going to need an equivalent of about 10 to 12 cups. And then at that point, you're just going to the bathroom way too often. So thank you, Heidi, for that question. Uh, Diane asked the question, what test would you recommend for a 53-year-old post-menopause over a year and have just started a menstrual cycle again? Well, imagine you're shocked, Diane. So technically, you wouldn't be menopausal if your menstrual cycle started up again. And this has happened a lot where women think that they are menopausal and their menstrual cycle actually comes back. It's not necessarily a bad thing because you remove stressors and then you can get normal hormone function back again. However, if you just had a menstrual cycle, you want to make sure it's not a one-off type of thing, and then it goes back to not having a menstrual cycle. But one of the things that we always do, especially if you're still cycling, especially if we want to get some ideas on labs pretty quickly, is usually we run a thyroid and hormone panel, in the blood and see kind of what's happening with inflammatory levels, with the hormones, and with the binding globulins, and a lot of those other things, because they all play together kind of like a Swiss watch. Special. Okay. Going back to Instagram, guys. Thank you guys so much for your questions. My wife was diagnosed with scleroderma June 2022. Doctor wants her to have a colonoscopy due to recent intestinal pain. What are your thoughts on that? Well, obviously not seeing your wife. Scleroderma is an autoimmune condition. Gosh, I always ask this question. I almost feel like a broken record. Does your wife have any tattoos? So anytime you're looking at autoimmunity, there's 100 different ones, and all they do is they just describe, they kind of describe where the immune reaction is coming from. So, Crohn's disease in the gastrointestinal barrier, rheumatoid arthritis in the joint capsule, lupus, in the cardiovascular system, also in the kidneys, scleroderma, the connective tissue in the or underneath the skin, Hashimoto's, it's in the thyroid, type 1 diabetes in the pancreas. So they're just describing where that's at. And that's why you always say, gosh, what is irritating that immune response? Like, why would the immune system want to do that if the immune system's not messing up? So if you come from a different perspective saying, what if the immune system's not messing up? What if it's just doing its job? And it's just trying to clean out damaged tissue, or there's been, tissue injury, or there's some kind of infection that's going on. But with the colonoscopy, not a huge fan of colonoscopies. I think there's better tests, especially if you want to look at colon cancer or something like that. I think that, in my opinion, doing a colonoscopy for like intestinal pain, or trying to rule out or trying to figure out scleroderma or things like that, I think there's better tests in regards to that, especially if they're having normal bowel movements, there's no blockage or anything like that. All right. Instagram, best approach for adenomyosis and endometriosis. Get your hormones tested, get them in the blood, but then also get them tested on a Dutch test in urinalysis to look at metabolism, and then test for, inflammatory triggers and things like that. You just had a woman with terrible endometriosis pain for 12 years, and her menstrual cycle was absolute. When she would come to that menstrual cycle, she'd be bedridden. And in about 3 months, she's like, wow, it's about 90% better. And I said, you're not out of the woods yet. So you need to do this, and this before it happens. But, just remember, removing inflammatory triggers is absolutely huge. But you want to see production, you want to see metabolism. That's why blood shows production, metabolism is shown within the Dutch test. And then you go from there. Work with the Wellness Way doctor. Okay. All right. So let's go back to Facebook. I have been having nausea almost every day after I eat. If you're getting nausea almost every day after you eat, I would say check your gallbladder. So nausea in the gallbladder, big time. Especially if you're getting nausea and when you eat some level of fat and you get like bloating, belching, and nausea, you may have some issues with gallstones or some bile sludge and things like that. And if you also have some issues with the in the past with the uterus, and you had problems in the past with the ovaries and things like that, think of what they respond to. They respond to estrogens, and are you able to metabolize those correctly at the liver? Um, all right. So Erica Hunt, best exercise for 20-year-old son who had a rugby tackle injury 4 years ago at T12, constantly bothers him, otherwise healthy and walk. Yeah, if they had an injury at T12, it may have been a compression fracture. And so if there was a compression fracture, then the tendency of the spine is to collapse into flexion like this, because that's what a compression fracture does. That's why if you get to it as quickly as possible, to do like a Sphinx exercise and get up onto your elbows while it heals, it can expand that T12 so it doesn't collapse. That's why in some people with osteoporosis, they have a compression fracture right where the ribs meet the lower back. That's why you see people develop that kind of the hump as they start getting more fractures. And one of the things that they do is they go in and like inject it with a cement to try to expand that. But I haven't seen it work very well. So that's why you need good bone health. But if it's one of these injuries, freak injuries, in someone who is only 20 years of age, they're going to have to work really hard at getting extension back into the spine, because they'll tend to want to go into flexion a lot. That's why the Sphinx injury, even like getting adjusted, foam rolling as well, trying to get into extension can help to keep that area opened up. But he's going to be kind of against the gun, because it's probably going to become chronic if he had a fracture in that area. So Facebook, YouTube, I've been taking Synthroid for 30 years. Is it possible to reverse my hypothyroidism? Okay, so is it possible? How to know if it's possible or not is to test it correctly. So if there is autoantibodies taking place, and then it means that there's been destruction of the thyroid gland. And what you also don't know is how much has been destroyed. So that's one of the things. So if there has been autoantibodies, if that's yes, then you got to figure out how much has actually been destroyed when it comes to thyroid issues. If you go back and watch the video I did last week, because there's other issues when it comes to hypothyroidism. So there can be an interference issue, which can be a toxicity issue with halides like bromine, chlorine, maybe a lack of iodine, but also fluorine. There may be a transport issue, and that might be due to estrogen dominance or being on birth control, things like that. There may be a conversion issue, in which that may be liver or gastrointestinal system, skeletal muscle, kidney. All of those things are the big converters of T4 into active T3. And it also just may be a production issue. And so that's where, even being iron deficient, being deficient in iodine, being deficient in selenium, being deficient in tyrosine, which is why, that's why you do need protein, you do need amino acids. All of those things. That's why you got to consider all of those different things, or it may be an immune response, in which case it's autoimmunity. So when people say, hey, can I get off of my thyroid medication? I'm like, I don't know. But we work with them, and sometimes they can, and sometimes there's too much destruction. But at which point, that's why we always recommend a desiccated thyroid or a pig thyroid, because it actually resembles more a thyroid hormone, because the thyroid gland just doesn't release T4. It releases mostly T4, T3, T2, and T1. And like, we don't even know what T1 and T2 do inside the body, but we know that the thyroid makes it, which means there's got to be a reason behind it. So a pig desiccated thyroid can be better. But the reason why doctors never want to do it is because your labs will never look textbook normal. So that's why they don't like it, because they're looking at TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and it doesn't ever look normal. And so they kind of freak out when they see that. Okay. All right. So let's take another question from Facebook and Instagram. You guys are falling asleep here on me. Go ahead and ask a question. All right. We got about 10 more minutes left. So this is long. Let's see if I can keep up with it. My 20-year-old daughter has neurocardiogenic pre-syncope, heartbeat span 60 to 160. Cardiologist put her on medication to help keep electrolytes in her body, then diagnosed with POTS, but she has it all. Okay. So I just want you to think of, like, when someone's heartbeat is going faster, okay, why would it go faster? Is because it needs to pump more blood. So that's why it would go faster. Your heart has a choice. Because I want you to think of, when someone talks about POTS, I want you to think of something extremely inflammatory that can cause the adrenal glands just to be like, ugh, like this, because the adrenal glands are making adrenaline. What does adrenaline do? Adrenaline helps the heart to beat faster and stronger. That's why if people get up from a seated position really quick and they get really, really dizzy, that is usually a problem with the adrenal glands, but it's not a problem with, it's a response to the adrenal glands. So you always want to look at something immune. So look at what could be happening with the immune system. So I want you to think of high inflammation and low adrenal output. So then why does the heart beat a lot faster? It's trying to supply blood. And if it can't beat stronger, then it's going to beat faster. And it's just how to supply the body with nutrients that it needs. But you have to go back and say, what else is going on? And what else is going on with physiology, and things like that. So is she eating enough? Are there any digestive issues? She have any issues with stomach acid? If she's low on electrolytes, a lot, why would she be low on electrolytes? There's a lot to uncover, with that. But, I want you to look at, POTS and look at it as an immune system issue, big time. So there's something happening with the immune system. So Cassie Newton, how are you? It's so good to see you guys. Heidi, you're welcome. All right. Any other questions? Oh, we did. So Stella, thank you for your question. I thought you guys on Instagram were falling asleep. I undergone 18 cervical decompressant sessions for a compressed T4 and T5. I'm sorry to hear that, especially if you've had a compression fracture. That can be really, really nasty. And you also want to keep the areas above and below it moving correctly, or else that they will undergo a lot more stress too. And then you can also have an issue above and below. If you guys ever look at anytime they do a disc fusion surgery, anytime that they mess with the mechanics of the spine, they fuse two bones together. You'll see that the body has to make up with movement above and below it, which is why too much movement and hyper, can produce instability, which then can cause issues with the areas above and below it. And that's why they just go up another level and fuse that one too. So it's kind of sad seeing people go through spinal surgeries, in my opinion, way too soon. The number of people who, rather than kind of gut it out and allow it to give the body time to be able to heal, they're in pain, and the doctor convinces them that this is the only option, and it gives them temporary relief only for things to fall apart later on. And so it's just sad how it changes everything permanently as well. All right. Ashley from Facebook asked this question. I have rheumatoid arthritis, chronic highs, but doc just recommends NSAIDs and antihistamine. Blood work was great. Stool test was normal. Should I get an allergy screen or really to help these daily struggles? My guess is if you still have rheumatoid arthritis and you have hives, there's something that's happening with your immune system. And if the doctor says that your tests are normal, then they haven't found it yet, and you have to test deeper. So NSAIDs, over time, they're going to continue to damage your gastrointestinal system. They're going to cause other damage as well over time. They damage the liver. They can damage the kidneys. And that's why you can't do it, for the rest of your life. And also, when I look at stool tests from an MD, I just kind of shake my head because they're not looking at everything that we are looking for. So if you're having hives, there's your clue. And there's a lot of different things that could be going on, but there's something happening in gastrointestinal system, big time. And so all an antihistamine does is it just blocks the receptors for antihistamine, so you can't have that response. But you want to go deeper and figure out, why is the immune system, discharging histamines, and just figure out, why are they discharging histamines? Because they're coming into contact with what they think is a foreign invader, whether that's an infection, and it probably is a food. So there's a lot to unpack there, but the first step is probably get a food allergy test, a true one, and actually get a true stool test as well. So that's why when people say, oh, so-and-so had a heart attack, and he just went to the doctor and he said he was healthy as a horse, or when people said, oh, I had a real bad day with COVID, I was so healthy, or someone so died from it. I'm like, healthy people don't die from it. Healthy people don't have heart attacks. Healthy people don't get cancer. And the only thing that the doctors are is they're telling you you're healthy because they're not testing for things in order to truly see what's going on inside the body. And that's why people don't ever have a resolution with it, because testing is inadequate. And the reason why they don't test deeper is because there's not a medication solution for it. So people continue to suffer while the doctor winks at you and say everything is a-okay. But here's the problem. I'm going to rant for just a little bit. Here's the problem, is that when a doctor can't help you, this is and I'm not speaking to you, Ashley, at all, just as an FYI. But when a doctor can't help you, you go and find a different doctor who's still going to recommend drugs and still going to recommend to just try to manipulate physiology. But what's interesting is with what I do is that if I can't help you, then people will say you're a quack. But they'll give an MD 35 different tries at it, and finally they come to us as a last resort saying, "Hey, work your magic," because I've let this fester for years trying to find the doctor to do it. Now I'm going to give you 2 or 3 weeks. So it gets frustrating sometimes. But yes, you have to get tested correctly. All right. Do you recommend any certain Wellness Way docs in Green Bay to evaluate my daughter? Tara, if you're in Green Bay, all of the doctors are absolutely wonderful. I know there's Dr. Mitch, there's Dr. Jason, there's Dr. Steven. There's a lot of doctors there. I would say, because I'm really, really good friends with, there's Nicole as well, Selesky. I would say Dr. Mitch or Dr. Jason would be the way to go. You can draw straws and figure it out from there, but just let them know that I referred you over from there too. And guys, if you are, if I always tell people, find a Wellness Way doctors near you. Go to www.thewellnessway.com. You can type in your zip code and do a search and see if you can find and be able to see a person in person, see a Wellness Way doc, and see if they're from there as well. So it's always easier to see a doc in person. It is actually, to get in person. It's easier to get in there than it is to do it remotely, only because I only have a certain number of visits available for remote. And also, honestly, it's a lot of extra work on my staff because they have to call a lot of people. They have to order a lot of labs and schedule it and drop ship a lot of different things. It's just a lot easier to do it in the office. So I've had super itchy ear canals, since the what. Have you ever heard of this? Or any natural-ish remedies? I have. If there is something going on with itchy ear canals, I would probably look at your stool and see what's going on. And so what's interesting is even the ears, if you get ringing in the ears or you get itchy ears and things like that, you can have some things with yeast and things like that can cause some of those issues. So getting a stool test would probably be a good way to go with that. Okay. All right. Is a Rogram shot while pregnant absolutely necessary? Supplements work. Fastest way to reverse cavities. Oh, we have a lot of questions that I just missed. Okay, we'll try to take a couple more here. My mom just had knee surgery. They put her on liquid, said she needs to stay on it the rest of her life. I don't know what liquid would be. Maybe Lipitor. Other ways to treat a skin infection without antibiotics or healing during and after antibiotic use. Well, you want to see where the skin infection is. Like, is it cellulitis? Is it underneath the skin? Or is it just on the surface of the skin? So doing some things can help. Colloidal silver can help. I know people do have some issues with the skin. You can put silver on it. You can put colloidal silver gel on it, which has antibacterial effects with it. Thin breaking hair. You want to figure out if you have thin breaking hair. You want to figure out if it's if this is a nutrition issue. you want to figure out if it's a hormone issue or if it's a thyroid issue. So I want you to think of either immune, hormone, or thyroid. So it can be three of those things. Sometimes two contribute to it as well. So the thickness of the hair, a lot of it can be hormonal. It can also be nutritional. So think of zinc and think of B vitamins and things like that that feed the hair follicle. But if your hair is thinning, a lot of it can be due to a decline in estrogens. So you want to figure out why that's happening, or if your hair is kind of slow growing, you want to think of that could be thyroid as well. So there can be an immune system insult. There can be a trauma, like traumatic illness. They call that shock loss. That would be if your hair is falling out. But if it's thin or changes, has there been any hormonal changes? Then this happens post pregnancy. This can happen with an illness, like an infection. This can also happen even looking at your hormones. If you have a lot of DHT too, that can even cause some male pattern balding as well. Do you think supplements work for osteoporosis, or is strength training the best way to go? What I think when it comes to osteoporosis is I think strength training is number one. And then number two, I would probably say after menopause, make sure you're carrying enough body fat, because enough body fat is estrogenic and that actually helps maintain bone. So where you see osteoporosis is very postmenopausal, very thin women. And so this is why carrying some extra body fat can actually help. And then also that I would say is make sure you're absorbing with enough stomach acid. So you need stomach acid to absorb calcium as well. So yeah, you do need calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, manganese, things like that. But make sure that you're absorbing it too. So that's why strength training, Vibe platform, make sure that you're carrying enough body fat. So a lot of different things with osteoporosis. Is the Rogram shot while pregnant absolutely necessary? I can tell you personal experience. No, never got it. Or my wife never did. Stage 4 endometriosis surgery, the best way to handle this. Have to check. Sometimes people have so much damage they have to get it out, in which it just cannot recover. However, here's the thing. So even if they're doing an ablation or they're removing the uterus, you still have the problem that's still there. So it's like having a crying baby and you just rip out the tongue so it can't cry anymore, but there's still a reason why the baby is crying. So regardless, you still always need to get tested. Eliquis, I believe that's an anticoagulant as well. So it's tough for me to comment on medications as well. Does drinking water during meals reduce stomach acid? Yes, it can. That's why even if you look at in animals don't drink water while they're eating as well. Particularly if you're eating if you're drinking alkaline water. All right. So Ashley, I once seen a nurse practitioner because I was not going to. She Googled my symptoms to diagnose me. Oh, love to see you personally. Say this closest wellness way for me is about 5 hours away. Okay, so Ashley, just let me know. You could actually reach out if you're on Facebook. Let me know where you're from, and also we do see people remotely as well. So, and you can actually see any doctor remotely, and it's just kind of who you jive with the most. So if it happens to be me, you can just go to top page. Please watch the inflammation event, and then you'll be able to schedule a discovery call with me. At the end of it, you'll see the link as well. But you can reach out to, and maybe we can get you in contact with someone else if you prefer. Sometimes women prefer to see a female. Regarding that, I don't have any problems with that as well. So Janice asks, do you have an office? Are you taking new patients? Yes, we do have an office. If you go to Exemplify Health Center, the Wellness Way, Yorkville, the other Facebook page, you'll see the office address. We're in Yorkville, Illinois. Yes, we do have a physical office. So we see a lot of people in person. We also see people remotely, and we're always taking new patients. And if you are from the Chicagoland area, go up, schedule for the inflammation event coming up December 5th. That's the next time that we're going to be taking new patients. What are your thoughts on rebounding? I think rebounding is awesome. I think rebounding is kind of the same as, doing a vibration platform and things like that. But I actually think it's good, but it goes the way of the sauna. It goes the way of doing cold plunge and things like that. Don't neglect the basics first and foremost. Okay. So, one thing that you can do that can be just as good as rebounding is, instead of rebounding on a mini tramp, you can rebound on your toes, and we would call that jumping rope. So you're still using the calves. Okay. What do you think of taking betaine hydrochloric acid for stomach acid reflux? I think it's actually great. One of the things that you can do is you can do a stomach acid, kind of a stomach acid test, especially if you're trying to see how much betaine hydrochloric acid you should be taking. So you take one capsule, wait about a minute, take another one, wait about a minute. And as soon as you feel stomach burning, then back off one or two capsules. And that's the dose you should take kind of at that time until you start to recover. So sometimes people might take one or two, and I've seen people need to take 11 or 12. That's how bad they are. So yeah, it's a great way in order to help sterilize the food, and sterilize the food in order. And remember, if you're low in stomach acid, or if you're taking a proton pump inhibitor, one of the things that you will repeatedly see is you'll see gastrointestinal infection because you're not sterilizing the food as well. All right. So from Facebook, how do you add body fat? How do you do it? Well, you have to eat more. You'd be amazed how many people undereat. Now, we're not saying that you need to, and this is when we test people too, because we do have some people who say you need to add more food. You need to add more protein. You need to add, especially if their immune cells are low, you need to add more body fat. And so the best way in order to get it is usually proteins and fats, usually fats, because they're the most caloric dense, but you also want to add good sources as well. So you just have to eat more. Um, so how do you feel? How do you know if you need to add in more body fat? Well, a lot of times, if you look at some blood work, you'll see some clues as far as your number of immune cells that you have. Looking at a Dutch test, if you're really low in hormones on a Dutch test, we're talking even lower than where you should be at in menopause as well. That will leave you some clues. But also you can do body fat percentage and test that. And there's a certain level of body fat where you should be at. And so, if your body fat is running in the teens post-menopausal, you probably should get that up a little bit for healthy function. Okay. Um, can a blocked ear be from clenching teeth? I would say it's usually a blocked ear. If you're looking at a blocked ear and it's not draining, look at the neck, or look at something that would cause a lot of mucus secretion in the mucus secretion in the ear. So the eustachian tubes have to be able to drain into the mouth or into the back of the throat. So look at something immune, or look at something mechanical that's happening in through the neck. Yes, Jezzy Cat. There's something that's going on with her as well. So hey, reach out to me, see if we can figure something out with you. Do you have any protocols for a child grinding their teeth at night? You want to look at, are they stressed? Number two, are there any TMJ issues, or are there any postural issues too? So the teeth always want to line up. So when people chronically grind, there's going to be a TMJ issues. And so if it doesn't line up, the body will try to grind the teeth until the teeth actually close together as well. So this can be postural issues too. TMJ, if the head is forward, the TMJ reacts to that as well. All right. All right, guys. So it's like 10 after 8. Holy cow, it's been a long time. That's all the time that I have for questions for you guys. And next week, just as an FYI, here's a little bit of a preview. I know that you can't see this on Instagram. Monday, November 27th. That's going to be in 1 week. Okay. So in 1 week, I'm going to be going over the ins and outs of the 5 minutes of fire. That's going to be the challenge that's going to be going on starting in December. This is going to be fun, guys. So while people are consuming all kinds of food, you're going to be consuming all kinds of fitness. Not a lot, actually, just 5 minutes a day. Everybody's got 5 minutes. Here's a preview, if you can see that, of some of the things that we're going to be doing. This is actually one of the demo videos that I have that you can see. And you're going to see beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and you'll get to pick the track that you want to do. But we'll have a workout posted every single day for 23 days. And then you can just go back and reference the video and see, how am I going to tackle this? Is it going to be beginner, intermediate, and advanced? So I made all these videos. And so here you can see rebounding. So that's just an idea. That's a good replacement for rebounding, but you'll see all of the movements that we're going to do. And yes, everybody can do them. So I think it's going to be really fun. We'll go over the ins and outs of it on Instagram, on Facebook, also on YouTube. So guys, join me next week and we'll go over the 5 minutes of fire. We'll go over how to qualify, how to download everything. I think it's going to be awesome. And make sure that you like the page. Make sure that you also share that so we get tons and tons of people involved. I think we can get 5,000 people involved. If we can do that, that would be awesome. I would be forever grateful. So we'll see you guys next week. I hope you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving. And just remember, don't turn the holidays into a celebration of yourself. Celebrate the reason for this time of season, and it's not to celebrate your gluttony. All right. So I hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving. We'll check back in with you next Monday. So guys, be well, be blessed. Remember who you are.